Last night, I published an episode titled Anti-Woke Idiocy. And in that episode, I was very critical of reactionaries who are trying to quash social progress. And there's part of me that is, of course, aware that the attitudes that I express in those situations are quite confrontational, and that some may consider that style to be in conflict with spiritual values. In fact, that has already come up in the past where someone was questioning my attitude and whether or not it was actually spiritual to do that. So I'm sensitive to that concern, naturally. And I woke this morning with something very poignant on my mind. And it is this. This is a true story. When I was a very young child, I know because of where this occurred that I was probably 5 or 6 years old because I was in elementary school. And I know the location of this incident. I can deduce roughly that I was around that age. But I also recall that there were aspects of this story that didn't make sense to me. So I know I was quite young because I couldn't rationally make sense of it. But here's the story. It was after school, and I found myself witnessing a young boy, a little bit younger than me, being beaten with a wooden baseball bat in the front yard of this house. And his mother, I presume it was his mother, because I can picture her screaming, the mother of the boy with the bat, was egging him on. So I was terrified, but I also knew I had to do something about it. I just knew what I was seeing was wrong. So I intervened. Somehow I managed to separate the two. The boy with the bat was about the same age as the boy he was hitting. And I didn't understand why this was happening. But I separated them, and then I tried to comfort the boy. I managed to walk him home with him guiding me, which turned out to be a pizza restaurant, which was not far from where we lived. So I took the boy to the restaurant, and I can remember the reaction of his family or relatives, whoever they were. Of course, they were horrified. The boy had blood streaming down his face. And then I went home and tried to explain to my parents what was happening, who were shocked, of course. I remember there was this strange commotion because something like this just doesn't normally happen, of course. In fact, I'm not entirely sure they believed me initially until a couple of the Italians showed up at our front door to express gratitude in broken English for what had happened. For many, many years later, my family would order one or two pizzas from this shop on whatever night hockey was playing on television. In Canada, we had this weekend tradition. It was called Hockey Night in Canada. And every Friday or Saturday night, there'd be a hockey game that millions of Canadians would tune into. And on that night, there were one or two large or extra large pizzas, and they were really good pizzas. Because this family who owned the pizza shop were Italian immigrants. They barely spoke English. But they always, they always made an effort to make the best pizzas for my family. I don't think we had had any interaction with them prior to the incident with the boy and the bat, but it ended up having long-term consequences for my family. And everybody loved these pizzas. and looked forward to having them every weekend. So that was my first experience with, I presume, racism. I haven't actually had many because it's just not a particularly prevalent thing in the part of the world I grew up in. It does exist, definitely, but it's not like in the deep south in the US or something like that. So I had an experience very young in my formative years where I had no choice but to stand up to bullying. I had another experience with bullying when I was a bit older, where I had no choice but to confront someone who was bullying me. And after I did, they stopped, but they had been bullying me for months, and I was living in fear until I finally stood up to them. And then the fear was gone instantly, and he never bothered me again. I actually had to fight him physically to get him to stop. It was the only way. He was torturing me, driving me nuts because he was jealous of my girlfriend. He actually broke my nose, which turned out to be a good thing because my nose had been broken previously and it was crooked. And after I fought this guy, when he broke my nose was straight again. The point of all this is that we have no choice but to protect the vulnerable, even if sometimes we have to put our own selves at risk. Because if we don't stand up to bullies, they will torment eventually everyone, including people we know personally and that we love. We have to take a stand. I'm not saying we go on the offensive, but I am saying that we have to protect ourselves from people who will do us and others harm if left unchecked. There is a line that we have to hold. We have to nip things like racism in the bud. Now, I'm not a member of a minority, but I would stand up for their right to exist and for their right to live peaceful, happy lives. And I do not think it is moral or ethical for us to simply sit on the sidelines and wait and see what happens. So we have to call these people out. We have to make sure they know it's not socially acceptable to engage in things like discrimination, regardless of who it is, whether it has to do with sexual orientation, ethnicity, race, whatever. We have to draw lines. Just think back to what happened in Germany before and during the Second World War to see what happens when it gets out of hand. We simply cannot allow that to happen. We have to put our foot down. We don't have a choice. We have to draw lines. And we have to protect the rights of the vulnerable in our society. So do I want to come on and be extremely critical of people? No, I'd rather not have to do that. Is it necessary? Yes, it is. This example of a mother standing by, screaming in rage at her child to beat another child on the head with a baseball bat demonstrates very clearly that if left unchecked, these people are capable of being vicious, and it is dangerously naive to underestimate them. We can see this happening before our eyes right now in Ukraine, where a bully, Putin, has literally destroyed and leveled an entire country. Imagine if that was your country. If we want to live in a world free of fear, we need to keep these people in check. We cannot realistically expect to have justice and security until there is justice and security for all.